welcome. We are here again for another episode of Exes and Babies. I am Jeff, and that is Sydney.
That's
And
me.
today we have a special guest here today, Marcus. So, Marcus, introduce yourself and let the people know who you are and what you do.
Okay. How y'all doing? First of all, thank y'all for having me on.
Thank you for being here.
My name's Marcus Alexander. I'm a clinical therapist here in Seattle, licensed in the whole state of Washington. So I deal with families and couples. And it's ironic that you guys have this podcast about exes because I deal with a lot of people who become exes eventually and have to work out that parenting part. So this will be interesting today.
Well.
Happy that you're here, though.
Yep.
Really happy. Your voice is needed. So, thank you for being here today.
Okay.
Yeah, what really excites me about this episode is that Marcus is a therapist as well as he co-parents himself. And so we'll be, exploring what that journey's been like for you and what some of your clients have to manage through.
Over 30 years of parenting, by the way. So,
30 years? Okay, cool.
Veteran
cool.
Yes.
Better.
Yep. So we got it.
Got
Good
my
to have
measly
you.
7 years. Why am I
13.
even behind
But
the
once you
mic?
parent 1 year, that's it. You're
Okay,
ready for
okay.
terminal
Life.
Yeah.
That's dope.
That's what's up.
I'm happy about this. Thank you
Yeah.
for being here, for real, for real.
No problem.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So, Marcus, tell us a little bit about you and your co-parenting situation now.
Well, it's complex, so I'm going to try to break it down from a timeline so everybody can understand. So back in 1992, way back then,
Oh, wow.
I had my first child, right? I was in high school. Teen parent, didn't even know how to take care of myself, so I had to take care of a child. My daughter was born. I had to figure out how to maneuver financially. So what I did was I had to go to the military, turn down some scholarships I had worked on in basketball, because scholarships was not going to pay for the milk. So
Right.
went to the military, instantly went overseas. But here's the difference: I could have had opportunity to just co-parent and not get married. But in my ideal world, I'm like, and I'm not going to have my child raised by anybody else. I'm going to raise my child. So the only way I can do that in the military is I had to get married. So
Let me pause you right there. Would you have done that differently? Now
absolutely,
knowing,
my whole life would have been done differently. But we'll get
Okay.
into that if
Okay,
we want.
cool.
Yeah, because now you have the advantage of hindsight, right? At the time, I was limited. My mom was limited, so I didn't have that much guidance there either. So, so I did what I thought was best based on my little brain at the time. So I thought what was best is give my child a 2-parent household. So I did that. Complete disaster. Because I still was growing up, right? You still growing up 17, 18, 19. So by the time we got married, we had another child during the marriage. So I had a girl and a boy. Marriage was a disaster, though, because I didn't know how to be a husband. So father, I was working on it because, you can do it as you go. But a husband, I completely failed on that part. So I was into sports, basketball, traveling around with the military with basketball. So I wasn't home enough. So that marriage failed because of that. The inability to be at home and be consistent when you have two, toddlers. So I ended up staying in Georgia. She ended up going back to Alabama. So now that made co-parenting a little difficult. So,
Just being across state lines.
oh, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Plus the reason why, she didn't want to get a divorce. So she was holding some animosity for that too.
Yeah.
So it was rough. So it bleeds down to the kids because now the kids are hearing her sorrow. And now they're, 5 and 3 actually. And now they're like, why are you hurting mommy? That type of thing. So, and then she's holding that parenting piece over my head, the visitations and stuff like that, So we had to eventually go to court and work some things out because we couldn't do it together. Which, as we get into the story, you'll see that it hurt my parenting situation with my kids today. So my daughter's 30 and my son is 28, but yet they still hold those trauma bonds from way back when. So.
Right.
Okay.
Did you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh. No. And once again, I'm happy that you're here, and because I have a 13-year-old daughter
Okay.
as well. And when you touched on the court aspect of it, that interesting thing for me too, because I had to deal with the court as well, and dealing with the court is always a last option in my
Absolutely.
opinion, because once you go there, that means you're completely taking responsibility all the way out of your hands now. Now it's all documented. Now it's all legalities now.
Yeah.
Right. So my question right now, before we could dive more into your background story, how did going through the court shape your outlook on parenting?
It simplified parenting. So the parenting
Oh,
piece
okay.
was, it helped the parenting piece, meaning it simplified, but it hurt the secure attachment with my kids because, court is not easy. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. It's not a win-win situation. So, you know, she's fighting for full custody. I'm fighting for full custody. We end up meeting in the middle. But meeting in the middle, somebody has to lose. So you're grieving that, right? So you're grieving that whole process. So when she was grieving that process, she's the domicile parent. The kids are absorbing all of that. Plus, it's just a loss. I left the household. So when you leave the household, regardless of what you get in the courts, you still lose out from the kids parenting because you need to be there every day, right? We're going to call it what it is. There's no way you can successfully parent from a distance. You can mitigate some losses, but for the most part, it's going to be some insecure attachments. And I didn't learn that until later. Back to your question, would I have done anything different? Absolutely. I probably wouldn't have went through the courts.
Okay.
Yeah, because I knew what it was going to cause my kids now.
Right. And if you don't mind sharing, what year was like the whole court process going?
96.
96. Okay.
So 96, we ended up getting a divorce in 96.
Okay.
So we was only together. We was together for 6 years because we was together 2 years in high school, then the 4 years married.
Okay.
So we ended up
high
getting
school
married.
sweethearts.
Yep.
Okay, so I heard you say a few terms, and I just want to make sure our listeners understand them. So you said like trauma bonds, insecure, secure attachments. Can you break that down for people and myself, honestly?
Yeah. Trauma bonds. You know, again, this is after my education, and I didn't know this at 17. But when you end up experiencing trauma, and to me, trauma is experienced, right? So it's perception. So when you share that with someone else, then it becomes a trauma bond. So my daughter and my son was young, but you know he kind of vicariously got some of that too, right? But my daughter and my ex-wife really had a trauma bond together. They helped each other out, which is unhealthy, right? She should not have relied on a 5-year-old to get her through the night,
Right.
which she did. So she cried, child cried. Now I'm the source of contention because here we go. So now, even though I wasn't directly abusive or neglectful to my child, she experienced what I did to my ex-wife. So that's a trauma bond. Secure attachments is, you know, when we have kids, we want to have the kids have secure attachments, meaning they know how to love, they know how to be interdependent, they know how to express themselves. Anytime you have a gap in that type of process, meaning the parents are still dealing with issues, it causes a break in that secure attachment. And what happens is that child now becomes self-sufficient. Every time you argue with your partner, especially in front of the child, it takes away from the child's experience. Meaning that child now adapts their experience to that, and now they become self-dependent, which means now they create their own self-defense mechanisms. And once they do that, now they're not relying no more on the parent, which makes them, they elevate their childhood a little faster, right? So all that stuff matters. So when you hear people say don't argue in front of the kids, because the kids are forced, even though they're not telling you this, they're not being open, they're forced to take a side because they love both of you guys.
Right. And when you say elevate their child, it means like
you speed it up.
You speed up their child.
Yeah, because now they have to think independently, which their brain is not ready for that, right? Because they don't. Because the parents are still trying to understand what the hell is going on, right? So how at 5, 7, 8 they're going to understand this?
Right. And that kind of what you just said that reminded me of something you said yesterday off camera about when we was talking about how adults are still dealing with childhood stuff. We're still immature, still self-conscious still to this day.
We are children.
We're still children, right?
In my head, yeah.
Right. So that when you said that's what hit about what you said yesterday too. So did your personal situation inspire you or did that help you lean towards becoming a therapist?
Absolutely. That was you was actually talking about this before the session, but here's the thing though, right? You know, I was all into business. I was making money, right? Working for Coke. I was good. And then I realized that I wasn't, you wasn't having joy and peace because I still had this broken relationship with my kids where it wasn't consistent enough for me. Plus, I realized I played a part in that. Before I even went to any type of school for therapy, I knew I kind of messed them up a little bit, right? Because I'm the dad. She's a girl. It's just some issues that she needed to deal with just with me. And I wasn't present because with my job, I was moving around from state to state. So I wasn't in the state that she was in. So even if I wanted to be present, I couldn't be there physically. So I realized that and I said, what can I do to give back to other people who are going through this? So I went to college one day and just talked to a career advisor, and they started walking me through all the professions, and it went all the way down from psychiatry to psychology, and then I ended up as a clinical therapist because I knew I could help a broad range of people. Plus, I can specialize in families, so that's what I ended up doing. And then that meant though I had to go through my kind of quarter life, midlife crisis. I had to quit my job that I've worked for years and had, kind of stability there, and it was like quitting cold turkey.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like you've learned through your years of coaching, or excuse me, therapy? That's like, have you taken things you've learned and apply that with your daughter? Like, have you?
Absolutely.
And what does
Now,
that
now
look
the
like?
problem is now we're in relationships. Now we're gonna get into some deeper. Relationship requires two people. So you can be as healthy and ready to work on things as much as you want. If the other person is not prepared, you have to be patient. You can't force them through their issue because they have to get there themselves. So my daughter to this day is still working through that because now she is married and she has kids. So she is kind of in that trauma piece, and I know it because of my profession, where she's like, my daughters are never going to experience what I experienced. But that to me is a reaction to trauma, and that's not how you do it. Because if you really want to be healthy, you'll be like, let me make sure that my daughter now sees me and my dad have a good relationship, but she's in the opposite side.
Right.
I'm gonna show you that I can do it without you.
Right. When
Yeah,
you-
my
go
bad.
ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I was gonna ask, after you got into clinical therapy, have you had those discussions with both your kids?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually, and this is again, we talk about trauma, it runs deep, right? So my daughter specifically said, I'm triggered when you're successful now, right?
Wow,
Because she
okay.
sees her mom as unsuccessful.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
So financially unsuccessful, her mom is, again, I think making like $12 an hour, struggling, right? So I can only do what I can to make sure that they're fine. I was financial, meaning I always paid for whatever they needed. I was always there financially, but they kind of seen us as a unit from the beginning, right? So they never broke that kind of viewpoint. So even as I moved on with relationships, they still felt that I should have been with their mom, and my success was a direct reflection of her failure.
That's deep.
Yeah, that is deep. I never thought of it like that. So it's like you said, it's trauma bonding.
Because they identify with her,
Yeah.
not our relationship individually.
And your success is. What do you think is spiteful a little bit? Like,
Oh, absolutely,
Okay, yeah.
absolutely. Like she personally said, I had to get off your Instagram.
Wow.
Like, I can't see you have fun with, and now I have twins. I don't know if I told you guys that, but I have twins
Okay.
now. So now, she just can't take that.
Just gonna take that because it
'Cause now-
reminds her of like what she wanted when she
Absolutely.
was a child.
Absolutely.
That's
Man.
deep.
So how does your son? Because you have a son.
Yeah.
Okay.
28.
28. Yeah.
But, and we're going to get to my second born son too.
Okay.
We'll get to that. But my son, my firstborn is with my ex-wife. And what happened was with him, he just completely went streets. So he went drugs and all that good stuff.
sorry
Right.
to hear
Yeah. So we still trying to work on getting him back, to the other side. But he has a lot, again, his mom grew up in the hood. So you got to think where she grew up at. So a lot of that influenced it, which I still had to get rid of some of that guilt. But when I look back and I go through the things from a therapeutic standpoint, because I had to go through my own therapy before I became a therapist, right? So I had to figure out, could I have avoided that? Could I have prevented that? And at some point, is a cause and effect. Yes. If you will go down that road of what if, yeah, it could have been different, but we don't know that, right?
Right.
So everybody's responsible for their own actions. So I can't be irresponsible and take the accountability from his mom. She had a right to move and change her life just like I did. Right. So I can't be responsible for her choices. So I had to get rid of that. I had to forgive myself for that because I was holding on to those grudges.
How hard
right?
was that?
It was tough because
what
it's
did
your
it look
child.
like?
It's your child because you think that you're living I've always made six figures since I was 25. So it's like I always had financial gain. It was hard to see her resist the co-parenting piece and have them suffer. That's where the courts came in at, right? And even with the courts, it's still a choice, right? If they say I don't want to go with you, either you bring a cop, which is traumatizing them even more,
Right.
to
Right.
get-
Right.
or you sit there and
Don't do
respect
that.
their opinions because you don't want to call, you just don't want to damage them anymore. So if you want to be with your mom this weekend instead of come with me, okay. It's times where I said, hey, let them stay with me. I was living in D.C., let them stay with me. They nice schools, top of the line living. I don't want that. They're not coming up there with you and you and your bitch.
Oh wow.
So that's the co-parenting cycle that I was in, right? So, and you get to a point where you don't want your kids to just see you fighting all the time, so you withdraw a little bit.
Right.
And you don't want to be fighting all the time.
Well, for my kids, I would have, but I'm thinking big picture. Now, if I come in and I'm yelling at the mom because I'm calling the mom crazy for how she's thinking, or doing what some parents do, go to the child and say your mom is crazy. See what I'm not going to do that.
Looking for validation from a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. So I just
Yeah.
said, you know what? They'll learn when they get older. That I'm there for them. I never stopped being financial, which is amazing. She kept taking the money. She never, but the story that was written for me, the narrative was dead be dad.
Mm.
But it's either that or you fight or you get a police to come get them.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's almost like it's a situation that you can't win.
Well, that's how I seen it. But
Yeah.
after going through therapy, I realized that I was winning because I had to make my own choices. She had to make her own choices. And then, it's cause and effect in life, right? That's part of, so I had to tell my daughter today is you made a choice. Believe it or not, even though you was a minor, you still made a choice. You have to live with that as well, because I had to live with the choice as a minor of having you, right? So we can't pick and choose what choice we're going to make and what choice we're accountable for. So, it was all that. So, we having to process through that. And then mom still to this day, because she has no therapy, of course. So she doesn't understand anything outside of her purview, right? So all she sees is her station in life right now, and then said, if one of those make-believe things, if you would have done this, I would have been better. But we're not living in make-believe, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The facts.
So that's how it manifests. But in the middle of that, I want to kind of talk about something too. In the middle of that, so I'm going through life and I'm dating another girl, right? So this is back in 2013, 14. And she ended up getting pregnant. So I have a son that is my third son, right? So he's now 7. So, and this is the most, I guess, the biggest reward in my life, because we're co-parenting, me and the young lady. She's in Florida, I'm here, and we're working it out. Okay. And we've been working it out since birth. I've been seeing him, pretty much 3-4 times a year. And I've learned from that co-parenting mistake back in the day. So
what do you mean? Elaborate on that.
Meaning I just know that I know what I want. So instead of speaking to my fears, I'm never going to be around my kids, I need to do this, and reacting to that, I now react to the goals. Hey, I want my kid to be this. And when I started manifesting that to her, even though we were not going to be together, and she knew we weren't going to be together. It wasn't we weren't even in a relationship when this happened. So she knew that, okay, I got somebody who's level-headed, who's going to work with me. Again, financials was never a problem. So he's going to have everything he needed financially, but I was going to give him now the emotional support that he needed.
I think you should make that a T-shirt. Don't react to your fears, react to your goals.
Yeah.
That was a bar you just laid just now. That's dope. So
That message.
Yeah, okay.
That's up.
So going into your practice, you move over here, move out here, set up your practice out here. How has the reaction been towards you, right? Being a black male family therapist.
Love it. I've been the best place. No, okay, so let me give you some background on that. I came from New Orleans. I had a private practice there. And it's ironic enough that even though I was in New Orleans, I only dealt with white clients. So even in New Orleans, when I was working in New Orleans, it was 60% black, right? Completely opposite in Seattle. But I only dealt with the minority in New Orleans, right? Because it was, I got connected because of my networks. I got connected with a lot of high-end people in there who wanted couples counseling. And it got to the point where it was so lucrative that, I just stayed with that, and it was more of a specialist type basis. So I wasn't advertising or anything. I've never truly really been on social media for counseling. I've been on social media for other things, but never for counseling. My business has always been word of mouth. I'm gonna pass you a card. Right? Call this guy up. So it was always business rolling. So again, I told you my wife ended up getting an opportunity she could not pass up here. So I was like, you know what? I'll keep my practice in New Orleans because it's COVID. So it's going to be virtual anyway, right? So, and then I'll come up here and start one in Washington. And I got licensed in Washington as well as California. And then once I got up here, I got connected with some people. It seemed like I always find networks, right? I got connected with some people who say, I know somebody, you're a minority. They tested me out to see what I know clinically. So once they did that, it was like, hey, man, we're going to hook you up with Microsoft, Zillow, all these big time companies. And I was like, okay, let's see how that goes. And got hooked up.
Right. So what's been I know you can't, client privilege, whatever document, whatever that clinical stuff is called.
Confidentiality.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. I also want to find out where we keep fishing.
What are your thoughts on confidentiality?
I was fishing for that word. That word was somewhere.
We got you.
What's the most common thing you run across when you do your sessions with families? Like, what's the common issue that you come across?
The common issue is a lack of compassion, right?
Ooh, okay.
Because people come in and they have their own notebook. So they reading off their own notebook. And the lack of compassion is the ability to see the whole picture. And so I try to get them to put their notebook down and let's read off one notebook at a time. So if you here with your old lady and you fighting and y'all going through stuff, I'm gonna tell you to, hey, put your notebook down. I know you're feeling some pain. Let's see, can we relate to what she's going through, even though you might not believe what she's going through.
All right. So all reading from one team book instead of
You have to be able to access feelings of your partner, or you just won't make it work. Right? Because you just be fighting.
Right. Do you think that's pride? Like,
Oh, so it's definitely pride, but it's also too. I tell people when you get here, it's not court. You do that in court. I object. This is what really happened. I really
no.
You don't do
No,
that
I didn't do that. No.
You can't do that in therapy.
No.
Okay,
Right.
cool. I might have tried it once.
Yeah, I don't like that, man. I don't care who's right or wrong. I just care, do you hear what the person's saying? Because perception is reality. As long as they perceive what they feel, you're never going to change their feelings. So you got to get into their world in order to see where the behavior is coming from, because you got to be able to separate feelings from behavior.
Do you think you need to do that for a co-parenting relationship to be successful?
Absolutely. Okay, let me give you a real life story. So, you know, it's funny that you guys have this podcast. So when I was in New Orleans, I was licensed to be a child custody evaluator. I don't know what they call it here, but child custody evaluator is who goes in, or they come into the office and then you map out who's going to get custody of the kids. So I was licensed to do that in New Orleans, and I learned a lot, right? Because you had to be an attorney, or you had to be a therapist. You can't do it if you're not. So I learned a lot about kind of the backgrounds of people and why they end up where they end up, right? And how the kids suffer from that firsthand. So when you go in there, you're interviewing kids and saying, who would you like to stay with? And they actually pick a parent, but that parent is the unsafe parent.
Interesting. Okay.
You have to be able to tell the courts that even though the child prefers this parent, drugs, abuse, or whatever, neglect, you can't stay there. So you got to go to this parent, which is the undesired parent. That was tough for me.
Okay.
Right, because the kid just know love. They don't know all that other stuff, right?
So why I just don't, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why a child would be? Is that true?
What?
A child's in a position to choose what
At 12.
is best for them.
Oh, at 12. Okay.
At 12.
Oh, okay.
Like
At
Even-
12.
that's still a child though.
But at 12 they got autonomy in the state of Louisiana. Now I don't know what Washington State is.
I
but
don't think it's like that.
in the state of Louisiana,
Yeah, I
you're
never heard of that
12.
one.
You have now you don't have the final say so.
Right.
Okay.
You're a part of the process. Now, but under 12, you just go with the flow, right?
You go with the flow.
And like you said, they always pick, like, not majority of the times they pick the unsafe parent.
Of course, because the unsafe parent don't have structure,
And
rules.
they can do whatever they want.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. And then you're a preteen. You know, about to go into my last couple of years of middle school, going to high school. Who do I want to be with? I can get away with the most.
Yeah.
So that's what they normally choose. But the pressure on me as the child custody evaluator is, you literally have to walk into court with this, 40, 50 page document that you've done research on with the family and say, based on data, you have to lose custody of your kids, right? That was tough. So coming up here, when I deal with families, I take all that experience now and I sit there and say, okay, we have to have a win-win situation here. If not, what are you in therapy for if you're not here to make sure everybody wins? This is not court, right?
Right. Where it's court, you do have to have a winner.
You have to have a winner and a
loser.
loser.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's always seemed like a battle line gets drawn when it comes to co-parenting situations. It's
Well,
like, I'm right, you're wrong.
It has to be, right? Because what you're doing is you're trying to convince yourself that you're not the problem, because ultimately you're damaging the child. Because the child's going to grow up and say, what happened to you guys, right? Because they're going to get into their own relationships, right? And they're going to be like, boy meets girl, have a child, they love each other. So what happened to my boy meets girl with my mom and dad? And when they start asking those questions, what's your response to that? We didn't work out. We just your mom's a bad picker. I don't know what you tell them, right? But you got to tell them the truth, because eventually it's going to come out, and that's when it's going to be a situation where you have to kind of negotiate them away from their trauma, because it's insecure attachments at that point, right? Because I didn't have my mom and dad with me all the time.
So what, in your opinion, from your professional as well as your personal life, how would you define like a healthy co-parenting relationship?
That's a great question. I think the two people need to have, I'm using my own personal co-parenting experience. Me and my ex, if you want to call it that, we never, ever had ambitions on being married and together. So I have no problem with telling my son that. It's the truth, right? So, but it doesn't take away from what he's getting from me, other than I'm not living with him, which is also causing insecure attachments, because he's like, man, I don't have what other people have, right? Which is a dad there every day to be there. So I already know he's coming in with some insecurities. I have to negate those insecurities with some positivity, so he can understand that even though you're walking with one leg, you still can do what everybody else is doing.
How do you do that? Like specifically,
I have to go to the mom, and we have to negotiate everything. And when I say negotiate, it's not a fight. It's a negotiation, meaning let me at least know what you're doing. I don't have to veto or not what you're doing, but I need to know what you're doing. So if it comes to me, I need to be able to speak to it, right? So for instance, if she's dating someone, I don't need to vet the person that you're dating because I trust you, and you're a grown person, right? So, but I need to know this person because I don't want something in the future to happen. Then my son say, well, you didn't even ask who was wrong us. So I need to cover my butt to make sure that I know that this guy knows what my core values are, right? So part of this is when you're dealing with somebody else, because you continually date. She's not married, so she's dating. I have to figure that out. And me being a therapist, she was apprehensive of that. She's like, I don't know about that, because I don't need my new person grilled by you.
Right.
So I said, well, I won't grill him, but I would hope that he would ask, knowing that I'm active in my son's life, that he would ask, well, who is his dad and what kind of core values do his dad have?
I don't know if that's very common.
It's not. That's why you have to be intentional about it as co-parents. You have to be like, remember, not my fear, but my goal.
Right.
My goal is this is what I expect. Do you agree?
And I think like with shows like this, it needs to become more of a common conversation because, there's a lot of single parents out here that still want to find their true love. And there's a lot of parents out here who are active in the child's world. So if I'm dating a woman who has a child with this guy, I'm almost expecting to meet him eventually.
Right.
Because I would expect him to be an active presence in this kid's life. So it needs to be more.
But as a parent, we sit there and we go to school and we make sure the teachers are okay. We make sure the school system is okay. The curriculum is okay. But then who's around our kids outside of school, we're not going to ask questions.
That's
just
I don't want to meet that dude. I'm cool. Really.
Jeffrey, do you have a story around this? Because I want to hear your perspective. It sounds like you got a little something. No, but what's been your experience with that?
No, it's like experience with that. Say I had my daughter young, 22, so it was more of a battle originally. Like, I didn't understand the importance of being on the same page. So I had to grow into conversations like that. Like, it got to the point, when I reached my 30s, had kind of like, hey, I am dating somebody. When do you want to meet her? Just because, she's going to be an important presence in my world, so I want you to get familiar with them. So we did have those conversations, but that took time to understand it. And like, he mentioned earlier, it's not court. It's not everything doesn't need to be a battle. Like at the end of the day, the well-being of our daughter is the most important to me. Right. So I hope you do trust me that I would pick somebody that's not going to put our kid in danger. Right. Yeah. So that you got to have it. And I realize how important that is to have that, because it still not only does it build trust with me and my partner, but it builds trust between me and my co-parent as well. It's like, okay, I am still an important factor in this whole situation.
Yeah, well, we got a job to do. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not even about my co-parent. It's about the job that we have to do. When we signed up to say we're going to keep the child, which we did, we had a job to do, and the job was no longer about us and our little personal feelings, right? It was about kind of how do we show up the best for the child, because the child didn't ask to be here.
Right.
So,
right, absolutely.
So, whatever that takes, if that takes your new partner to be a little bit uncomfortable, so be it. I'd rather that than my child be uncomfortable, Right. So if you got a person who's uncomfortable with meeting me, then you got a problem. Because it's not like I'm in the street with a gun in my pocket ready to shoot him. You know what I'm saying? So if he's afraid to meet me, then we really got a problem, right?
Right.
Little Marcus from Mobile out here.
Right. You know what I'm saying? The gas pump.
I will say it can be nerve-wracking. Like, I've gone through this process. It's not common, because it's not common for parents coming together to introduce a new life force for the kids, right? It's not very common. Because of that, I can see why someone would have some hesitancy, especially, I don't know, men, testosterone, y'all got energies and stuff like that and all that. And so, and if there's feelings that haven't been completed or like have gone away in terms of both the parents, and that can come into play. And so, I find that I totally get that it can be uncomfortable, and that's why one of the episodes we're definitely going to dive into, like, what that conversation can look like.
Absolutely.
Like when you're introducing, when should you introduce folks? What does that look like? And when do you have this conversation? What does that look like? And go from there. And so we'll definitely go into that, because I've had that conversation with my ex's girlfriend, and I would say it's been incredible. It's set the foundation for something.
So when was but let me ask you a question though. How early on were you introduced to her?
That's a good question. I would say it'd been months. It'd been months into a relationship. And so then the reason why
Did you know about her from the beginning though?
I did. I actually know of her. Like, I knew of her from childhood, like from high school. Yeah.
So it's a familiar. Okay.
Yeah, somewhat familiar. We weren't close, but I always knew of her. And so, so when the moment I knew it was time, luckily, okay, let me take a step back. Me and my ex decided before we started seeing other people, luckily we had that like grace period, right? To say, hey, what is it going to look like when we bring other players into our lives?
So y'all had an agreement already.
Yeah, we did. And so that was helpful to set that foundation. So when that time came, maybe people would forget. Maybe, I don't know. We didn't have to worry about emotions or whatever getting in the way. The other parent or the other potential parents' opinions coming into play and their insecurities. So we actually set that foundation. So I was good. And so when I actually started hearing my son mention the other woman, a number of times, like a lot, like it was like becoming a theme, like, oh, you know, we did this, we did that, oh my God, I love them. I'm like, all right, cool. Sounds like it's time for me to like meet this person. That's so great that you're so excited about them. And so that's when I reached out to my ex, and I think he was a little resistant at first. He's like, I don't know if that's really critical. And I'm like, bro, we talked about this. Like, we literally talked about this. Like, what do you mean it's not critical?
So he was afraid you was gonna.
My perception, he'll have to speak for himself. Maybe we'll get him on an episode. I would love that. But my perception was a little discomfort for him. And he did say like, okay, well, what is it that you want to talk about? And so once I was like, okay, and this is my advice to everyone else. Why don't you guys have the topics, like the what do you say, the agenda?
I like that.
For that meeting, so everyone knows what, and then the guidelines. Have that already planned out, sent in text or whatever you want to do on a phone call. And then, so when you go into meeting, there's less surprises. I think that's
and I think too the other part to that, I like that too. That's why I'm pretty sure y'all successful at this. But the other part of that too is asking the new person, the guy you're dating or the girl you're dating, letting them know here's what's going on. Are you okay with that eventually? Yeah. Maybe not the first date, but eventually, if we're 90 days in, hey, I'm letting you know that it's going to be a point where we have to kind of meet up with my past.
And let me add this part: be self-aware of what that person's in your life about. Like, if that person is just
there you go.
A situation,
there you go.
Do not bring that person around your child.
Yep.
Like, just because it feels good, don't do that. And I think I see that happen a lot more than people will care to admit of situationships, and then they try to do the whole family dynamic, like, oh, here's my kid. You know?
Absolutely.
But don't do that. Just be self-aware. Don't do
that.
I
agree, but I think some of that too, you know, we're taking the accountability away from the person, right, the parent, because I think if you're a bad picker, you do that without even knowing. You're thinking you're doing the right thing, you're doing the wrong thing. So you got to be a good picker in understanding what the boundaries are with this relationship. If it's just a booty call, then let it be a booty call, right? But some people get infatuated with that, and because we get consistent, and all of a sudden you think you're familiar now, and you can go to the next level. When the guy's still thinking you're just a booty call.
Yeah,
right?
they cook you one dinner, and all of a sudden, oh man, we together.
We together now, right?
If the dinner's hitting, like I don't know. But let's help our listeners a little bit more. So I know we're saying, like, you're saying be self-aware. You're saying some people are bad pickers. Like, what can someone do if they're trying to not be those things, or they're not even ready? I don't know. Like, what can they think through as they're deciding, should I introduce this person to my child?
Well, I think that's good. Marcus Alexander. No,
but it's for real.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah.
Get someone to back.
But you got to know yourself, though. Know thyself, right? You got to know from your lived experiences kind of what's right or wrong. If you don't learn from your past, especially the worst parts of your past, then you're never going to get better. So eventually, over time, you realize, just like interviewing for a job, what do I want for this job? You got to have your job description, and then you got to interview based on your job description, not based on what they present you. And I think sometimes we oh man, he looks nice or she looks nice, and you throw away your job description. You're like, I just want to experience something, right? Right? And then all of a sudden, once you experience something, we know, right? Once we hire somebody, I'm using that word. Once we hire somebody, we feel like we got to stick it out, right? Knowing that this person is not qualified for the job. So I think not getting caught up into the surface level stuff and really knowing what your core values are. Now you're going to pick based on your core values. And then you're not going to make any decisions if that person don't go, past what you say, here's my core value. Can you do it? Show me. That's what dating is all about. It's about interviewing, right? It's not just about having fun. We're not just going to go bowling and go hiking. We're not just going to do that, right? We're going to have an agenda, and we're going to have a purpose if I want to date for a purpose. Now, if I just want to date for a booty call, then it's totally different.
Right. Yeah. Which is still a purpose, but it's just like, don't mix your purpose.
It's a valid purpose, let me tell you.
But we're talking in terms of kids, though. My kids are never going to see you. So you just know that. I don't care how good we are in the bed, they're never going to see you.
Right. So I had a question. I know I want to give you time if you had a question.
I'll go after you.
Okay. So how long have you been practicing the therapy?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. So since 2012.
Okay, so you began practicing in the beginning phases of social media.
Oh man.
So have you seen a difference of family? Okay, so how if you want to
because I think family. I think okay. So here's the thing: social media can be pretentious, right? So you can almost believe your own hype. So you'll go on there. I have a couple. Just giving you an example, who came in. The guy thought everything was great. The woman reached out to me and was like, "We're struggling. I don't even know who he is." He's like, "What are you talking about?" So he proceeds to show me his social media page. Look at us, man. We're having fun here. We're having fun here. I said, but that's not checking in. That's not connecting. That's just a picture, right? Just know that's just a photo album. And it took me probably about 2 or 3 sessions to get him to understand that social media doesn't reflect who you really are in your relationship. Wow. So we had to break that down because you do get lost in the likes, right? This guy was getting 100 likes, you know.
Psychological.
So it's definitely changed things. Plus the dating game, right? The dating game now I can just go on social media, and even if I'm married, and just DMs now are not checked unless your significant other have the password, right? Unlike the cell phones back in the day, right? Cell phones, I can go check the records and see what you're doing. Now, infidelity can come all ways now. Right.
So I was so curious about that. So before social media became a permanent state of everybody's life, how were family dynamics to you then?
Well, 2012, social media was there. Facebook was there. People started migrating from Facebook to Instagram, right? Then I think even before that, they had this thing, MySpace or whatever.
You said this thing.
Because I was grown by then time. I
you said this thing. I think it was MySpace.
Yeah.
I miss you, Tom. Tom, I need you to come back, Tom.
Oh, my God.
That's my guy, Tom from MySpace.
Oh, my God. Todd, or it was Tom.
See, you don't even.
I wasn't a
good
friend
in
to
the
Tom.
era.
I wasn't a good friend to Tom. I didn't even remember his name. But
my bad.
Thinking about like your current marriage, right? So you have a new marriage. Or not new. How long you been married?
We've been together for 7 years. Okay. I mean 8 years, sorry, and married for 6.
Okay, awesome. And so, how has that dynamic been with your older kids, your 7-year-old? Like, how has she played a role? Does she have a connection with the mother of the 7-year-old? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. She does have a connection with everybody. The problem is, again, the whole dynamic of she's thriving, I'm not thriving, so I'm not going to work on that connection. Yeah. So my wife has extended herself tenfold to my child, both kids, but definitely to my daughter, to the point where she's almost taking her in and like, I'm gonna show you how to get money, pretty much, right? And I'm gonna help you.
That's a way to connect.
But
it's a great way to connect.
But created her own business and stuff like that, and got everything licensed and trademarks and all that stuff. But still rejected. My wife was rejected, because I don't want it from you. I want it from my mom. I want it from my dad. So again, when someone's hurt, and I know my daughter's hurt, right? Because I see it in her own marriage, right? So she picked the people who she thinks is just like me. So people who, even though I wasn't hurtful, she picked a guy who is hurtful. That makes sense, right? So we're working through that part, right? Still trying to talk to her, still reaching out to her. So it's not like it's a dormant relationship, right? But you can't put in more than you get back in return.
Why is that, as a parent?
Because it's unequally yoked. You're teaching them the wrong message, right? A relationship is a relationship, whether it's a parent or not. You have to teach that you have to give something in a relationship to get what you want out of it. So if not, then I'm not going to drain myself and my energy with somebody that I'm not getting a return on investment.
Especially if does that change for age? Like, if now she's an adult, but if she was a child, would you still feel that way? Like, I can't keep.
Well, she don't have the ability to say it as a child, but again, it depends on who is managing the child, right? Because the child is not managing themselves. So if you have to fight a bigger issue, then that's going to be a problem, right? Which the other parent. I think with my daughter today, I run this risk of saying, I want to treat people with their free will. I want to treat them and meet them. You have free will to do whatever you want, right, in life. If you want to go to church and give yourself to God, you can do that. If not, you can't. Your free will. So I'm not going to impose on their free will and say, you got to be in a relationship with me my way, because that's just too controlling. When they come to me, it's because they love me and they want it. That's what I want, and I'm patient enough to wait for that part. I'm not going to sacrifice their lived experience for that.
Like you said earlier, results based off your goals and not your.
Well, I know who I am. Yeah. No, it's based off who I am. I know who I am. I know I show up for you. I mean, I've paid for my daughter's wedding. $15,000 She just got it till she asked for it, because that's my job, right? I didn't sit there and say, well, you weren't talking to me this month. I didn't hold grudges or anything like that. College, you know, all this stuff she got paid for. So I know I've been there. She can go look at the receipts herself. I'm not going to show them to her. She can go look at them herself. But it's never going to be a situation where deadbeat dad equals what I've been giving you. I've showed up for her games. She was a head cheerleader. Showed up for all her games. You know, I did my part in the sense of what I could control, right? How you feel about me, I can't control that. But I can come to you and ask you, what do you want me to do? And what you're asking me to do is unrealistic. I'm never going to be with your mom. I'm never going to not have fun and enjoy my life.
Right.
So if you want me to just be down and out and depressed, that's not who I am. So.
And I think for like most fathers that I talk to, they're so afraid of taking that approach with like kids that are still angry with them, you know? So I think that's a good, healthy place to be in. Just like, hey, I did the best I could.
Well, I know, because I know I'm a child, right? I know that my mom didn't do everything that I think she probably could have done, but it doesn't take away from the fact that she could have put me in a dumpster. She could have. She could. I mean, no one's going to be perfect. We don't get a handbook and say, here's how you have to do this, right? Like a driving test. So, you know, you're going to make mistakes. I want to deal with humans, though. Like I told my daughter, I want to deal with you from a human side. You know, if you know that I'm not good for you, then I can't do anything about that. Right. But if you believe that, then I got to protect myself, because then you're going to react to me as if I'm that person. And I got feelings as well.
Right.
So I got to protect myself. And that's part of being healthy.
Cool. So I had a question, and this is okay. So, you know, before you get married, you go to marriage counseling, right? Do you think that it'd be a great idea for parents to have like parents counseling or parents therapy before they start having kids?
Absolutely. I call it pre-planning. Right, that, you know, family planning or however you want to name it. But I think you should go through that, because what happens is when a child comes in, acts of service steps in. The child's gonna come out and be like, me. I don't care what y'all got going on. Feed me, clothe me, keep me safe. So now the time that y'all did have to work on those opportunities per se is no longer there, because now the child is dominating that time. Gotcha. So if you don't have the necessary tools to work through that, then the child would be perceived as someone who's breaking up the family. When it's really not the child, it's your lack of skills, right?
Right, they're projecting
They're projecting it, because the child's the new thing. That's the only new thing in the relationship is the child, right? Versus your adjustment as an adult.
Got you.
Because if you plan for it, you should know it's coming, right? But sometimes we have kids and we don't plan for it. So we're surprised, like the child's gonna be up all night.
We all sharing that.
The child is up all night. Who knew? Right. We didn't work on who's gonna get up with the child. I gotta go to work. Who's gonna
have assignments around here?
Right. Yeah, no, Claire. I feel like bringing my business project management skills into my personal life has been tremendous. Yeah. And I treat, you know, my co-parenting relationship as like a team dynamic. So like, how do we continue to nurture this? What is your communication preferences? What are my communication preferences? Let's check in. Like, how are things going? What could I be doing better? What could you be doing better?
Absolutely. And then realizing too that it's okay if we make a mistake. It's not about perfection. It's about awareness. We got to be aware of the mistake, though.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like, let's say some co-parents come into your space to do some co-parent therapy. Like, what are some things you think you would work on with them?
First thing is, you know, anytime you come into a space in a multi-person therapy, couple therapy, family care, it's all individual therapy. It's me managing those individuals. You should come to therapy. I don't care who you're coming with, working on yourself. So it's not about telling your other partner to do something. It's about, what do you feel your deficiencies are? So I first attack, do you see yourself as a part of the weakness? If you don't, then we have a bigger issue, because that means you see yourself as perfect. You see yourself as not the problem. So
ain't my fault.
Right. Because, you know, by the time you get to a co-parenting piece, meaning the relationship is over with, it's still some animosity there. Come on, because no one gets into a relationship to end it, right? So you still have to deal with those egos. Those egos is, you know, I got like right now. I want to ask you so bad. Your ex, did he have a problem with you dating, having sex, having guys in this space? Did he have a problem with that? Because that's an ego thing. So that's going to interfere with the parenting if he don't know how to self-regulate.
Right.
So it's a lot of that stuff we work on in therapy, right? Okay. What's your, you know, I call it emotional intelligence, right? 5 things, right? You're going to be your self-regulation, your self-awareness. What's your goal, which is the kid probably.
Better be.
Well, you know,
you said probably.
I don't know. But some people's goal is she don't have nobody around my kid. It's just, you know, I need to still have a key to her house. It's really drastic.
Wow.
You're like,
Well, I'm gonna pop up on her. And
Right.
Whenever I make sure the kid is okay.
Right.
No, I want to know who you got over there who's doing what I'm not doing.
This coat in my house. I was bringing this coat back. You know?
Oh my
So you got to know what
Why?
somebody's motivation is, right? And then you got, you know, social skills, meaning I need to be able to interact in multiple spaces, not only with you, but with my child and with the person you probably meet. And then the last one is going to be empathy. You just got to understand that we moved on, man. You know, let me be happy. You know what I'm saying? Support me.
I was actually, can you define empathy? Because people get apathy and empathy confused sometimes.
Apathy, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
You want me to?
No, I thought you was about to say something about apathy. But
I don't even know what that means, actually.
Okay. Well, empathy is the ability to sit there and say, oh, I see you going through something, and I see it's causing you stress, right? The difference between empathy and compassion, which is the two that people normally get confused. Compassion is I see you going through something, but I want to do something about it.
Okay.
Right.
It's like a step further.
But empathy is just like, okay, I know you're going to be dating somebody. There's nothing I can do about it. I just got to understand your life.
Right.
Now, if this guy was a girl truly compassionate, they would be like, you know what? I know you need to move on. We're no longer together. If you need to date, I'll keep the kid. How about that? Because I know I want you to be happy. Right. That's compassion. You're doing something about me. You're pushing me toward happiness.
As long as it's healthy and it's
constructive. Long as it's healthy, yeah.
Right, boundaries.
Yeah, but it's co-parents out there, man. They work wonders with, you know, they all together. You know, I call it the Will Smith effect, right? You know, they all grew up together, right?
Wait, did you come up with that?
No, I'm just
the Will Smith effect.
It's just what it is. From day one, here's my ex, here's my son.
Yep.
Let's all do this together. Why are we cutting people off? You know.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
High level of trust and boundaries and, you know, expectations have to be present, but you work that out.
I feel like I feel like the best example, and this doesn't have to be the best example, but I think I feel like I will have arrived at co-parenting success if we all go on a family vacation together. Because vacation, now we ain't got to do that. You could be a great co-parenting situation and not go on vacation together, so I respect that.
Yeah.
But I do feel like if you have the ability to share your time off together, you're choosing to be around each other, right? I think that could be a great thing. Obviously, there's a lot of boundaries, traveling with people. There's so many things there, but yeah, I feel like
I worry about the people, the people who are your partner. When I have time, if I'm dating you, I don't want to spend our time with your ex. Y'all do that on y'all. I mean, I'm not gonna knock it if you want to spend time with him, but I don't know if I want to spend my quality time, my 1 week off of work, my whatever with your ex. That's just, it's getting too crowded right now.
Yeah. And I respect that. I do.
I think with me though, we had to be together for a couple of years.
So it's gotta be so grounded.
Yeah, before that discussion even happens.
So grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not nowhere near that.
You're not there?
I don't even got one. I don't even got a person right now.
It's a goal, though. It's a goal.
So I think that's
Yeah. So I had one more question.
Okay.
So let's speak to the co-parents that know there's something's wrong, but they don't want to go to therapy. What advice or what would you suggest they do to figure out how they can reach that point where they do need to go see somebody like yourself?
That's going to be hard because most of the time you won't know. If you don't want therapy, then you're thinking you have the answers, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, you don't want to get the answers because you know you already have them. I would challenge people to have a checks and balance in their life, whether it's parents, family members, or to be honest with you, the child, depending on how old the child is, right? I would have the parents ask the child, "How do you see us?" Because the biggest report card you can get is from the person you're trying to change, right? And trust that person that you've been giving that person a chance to have critical thinking skills, right? And I'm not saying you don't do this at 6 years old, but you definitely do it in preteen on up, 11 on up. You ask, hey, what do you see? Yeah. What do you see the outcome? What's the best outcome between me and your dad? What do you want us to improve on? What do you want? Because they get a chance to see dad and mom, right? Mm-hmm. So they get to know the best of both worlds. You give them limitations. Mom and dad are never going to be together. Mm-hmm. We're never going to be living in the same house. You give them parameters. Then now with those parameters, now how do you see us? And then based on what you want, because we should be doing it for you, right? Because you're the one that's going to be benefiting from this.
Right, for sure. I mean, I asked Dior this morning, what are the biggest differences you see between my house and your dad's house? And he's like, your house means free time. I'm like, huh. And then I feel away because I don't feel like it is that way, but whatever. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but your house is free time. Dad's house is work and then free time. I'm like, I make you read. I mean, I'm glad you think that reading is free time though. That's what's up. That's good. But anyways, but like I'm already kind of asking questions, and I am trying to set him up for success. He's 7, so he's a little too young to really, he's a bit of a people pleaser. It's probably survival. That's probably age appropriate. And so I know that he wants to say things that are make me feel good. But I am trying to set him up for like, okay, give me feedback. I'll even give him examples like, maybe you didn't like when me and your dad did this, or like, maybe I was too impatient with you. I think I was too impatient. Like, what are your thoughts? So I try to like at least give him some examples of where I'm failing, so he can have the foundation for like, how do I give my mom feedback? So we'll see how that ends up.
That's important. That's important too. But also, I know we don't have enough time, but we need to really jump into kind of those. How do you see gender roles? Because kids, research has shown they see gender roles real early.
You said gender? Oh, gender roles. Okay.
Like you're a woman. I'm a man. Dad's a man or a boy, whatever. And I expect certain things without anybody telling them that. They just observing, right? So you got to talk about that too, because sometimes now in today's society, those roles are reversed, right? You might be the breadwinner, not dad. You might be the one that's more strict, not dad, so you got to make sure that he understands all of that. And then don't get confused with that, because you guys are not in the same household.
That's dope. Damn, it's incredible.
Right. One thing I wanted to also talk about too is because, Exes and Babies offers coaching. And so like, have you known people to use therapy and coaching together?
Yeah. Let me break that down real quick though, because I think it's been, are you a life coach? I could be. I think that's part of therapy, right? Life coach is, I'm going to work on today going forward, with hitting your goals. Therapy is, I can do that as well, but it also tells you why you've been held back.
Right.
So it goes back to the trauma, and it goes back to your own behaviors and learned behaviors that you learned through childhood and your lived experiences, which life coaches don't do that.
Okay.
Right?
That's right.
You're not licensed or trained to go back to someone's trauma and say, here's what's holding you back though. I can give you a roadmap to Florida. But if I know your car is messed up and it's damaged, you're not going to get there.
Right.
So I need to get you to start with the car first. Make sure the way you're going to get there is healthy.
Gotcha. Right. I agree. I'm a coach, and I would never want to go into that icky, like in the past stuff.
And you should.
I'm literally not licensed to do that. But yeah.
Right. But you're good at saying, here's how you get to where you need. You the GPS. I think that's important.
Dope.
Absolutely. All right. Is there any like final words you would say to people who might be struggling with co-parenting?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is embrace it. I think the fact that, each child walking around, yourself included, had 2 parents. So embrace the fact that you can actually make a bad situation better by sitting there having open communication, trust, compassion, and then it's still some emotional intimacy in co-parenting, right? I know every time you and your co-parent make a good decision that's really healthy, it still gets you wet. But it's not wet like that though, right? It's wet in the sense that, wow, we are being adults, we're being mature, and I like that part. And my kid gets to see me and his father or mother kind of co-parent and relate to each other. I think that's going to help them long term. So make sure that you're always leaving that open communication and transparency there. I'm not hiding anything from my co-parent. It's not going to be one of you don't need to know. You can know everything about me. It doesn't matter, right? Because everything's going to be used for the betterment of the kid. So.
Yeah.
Right. That's dope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time and dropping some knowledge and some gems.
Yes.
Yep. I appreciate you guys having this platform, but this is good. So I look forward to following you guys and make sure that y'all keep having these guests on talking about co-parenting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.